The topic for tonight is, just to give it a word, a title, is nisyonos, which means tests or trials, tribulations, challenges, difficult situations, temptations, all this kind of nisyonot. And one of the things we're going to look at is the meaning of the word nisayon. The Ramban, at the beginning of the Parsha, the Akedah, has an insight into what the nature of a nisayon is, of a challenge. But we all know that on a daily basis, and certainly within our lives, we have a whole chain of challenges, and the question is how to face them. So here are the issues that I want to talk to you about tonight. First of all, how does the Torah itself relate to human challenges? Does the Torah poo-poo them and make nothing of them? Or does the Torah acknowledge the difficulties that we face, the temptations? The second question I want to address is, are we always guaranteed in every single challenge that we face in life freedom of choice? Or is it possible that there are certain situations in which it's beyond our control, and the Torah itself recognizes that we will not succeed no matter how much we try? The third question is that often we hear people complain, and they'll say, look, I did all this, I was successful, I triumphed in the challenge, why don't I feel the reward? Why don't I see the reward? Why isn't it fast and come? Is this a justified argument? And if not, how come we really don't experience the rewards for a successful trial? Question number 4. Does a challenge in life go as far as to demand of a person that he or she go against his very nature or her very nature, to change our very essence? What's the outer bounds or the extent to which a nisayon could go? Question number 5. Should one deliberately expose himself to a challenge with a sense of self-confidence, I will succeed? Or should a person say, I'm going to avoid all challenges, let God impose them upon me, I'm not going to seek them out? And finally, my last question, how should we face challenges? Are there any guides, guidebooks on how to, what secrets can we reveal from Chazal as hinters or pointers to overcome temptation? Okay, that's a heavy introduction. Now we'll see what we can do. On the first question, does the Torah recognize the difficulty of challenges? Take a look at the first challenge perhaps in human history, the Eitz Hadas. Vatera ha'isha ki tov ha'etz lemachol v'chitava hu la'einayim v'nechmad ha'etz lahaskil. And I'd like to raise the following question: why is the Torah so verbose? The Torah, as you know, is so abridged and so precise and limited in its use of words. I mean, the entire story of Masechta Shabbos, 39 categories of law, is written in one pasuk. The Torah is very stingy on ink. And here, phrase after phrase describing how attractive the fruit was, how tempting it was, alluring it was to eat. And therefore I submit the following proposal. The Torah recognizes the difficulty of challenges. It's not going to consider us childish if we complain, oh, this is too much for me, the temptation is so great. These are valid arguments, and the Torah is giving validity to that. Tova eitz lamachol. I give the following mashal. Imagine, and this is a good room to give the mashal in, imagine if this room was full of toys. Thousands upon thousands of toys, different toys. You take a child and you introduce the child into the room and tell the child you can play with every single toy except for one toy. what's going to happen?
Play with the one toy.
The child will sit and look at that one toy. Nothing else exists. The curiosity of the child, the fact that you've limited. Chava had a sense of observation. We once talked about this, Lahaskil, if you remember. And she looks at that apes and she notices that the fruits of the tree are special. There's something very alluring, especially different about that tree. But ask another question. Despite the fact that the Torah acknowledges the difficulty of the challenge, at the end of the day, is she held to task? Is she responsible for the crime?
But it's almost a moot question, because if the challenge is not real, if you ask an 8th grader how much is 2 plus 2 and he gets 4, that's not a challenge.
But I think the Torah went out of its way to show you how difficult the challenge is. You may say, okay, it's a challenge, I got to overcome temptation. But I think the Torah, again, it's just my own take on it.
Let's say the fruit was filled with worms, right? It wouldn't be a challenge.
Right, but David, between that extreme and the other extreme of the allurement, the dazzling excitement, again, look at the Torah, word after word after word. Perhaps the Torah is telling us that yes, we are being placed into situations which are very difficult challenges, that we have to overcome a lot. The temptation is intense. Again, I don't have to read the pasuk for you. It's right there. I mean, from all sides, the Torah hits you and says, yes, we are acknowledging the difficult challenge. This is not a small mountain to climb. If you're not feeling well, okay, you kvetch. We take the kids up Masada, on a teal. They kvetch. It's 4 a.m. It's because we want to get up there before sunrise. So you get a little kvetch here and a little kvetch here. No, this is more than climbing Masada at 4 a.m. This is a difficult challenge to overcome. But the flip side of it is that we have to understand that as challenged as we are, the criminal act remains exactly what it is. And therefore we're going to suffer the consequences. And I come back to my other question. Are there situations in which the mountain is so difficult to climb that it's beyond human capability? Will Almighty God place a person into a situation in which there's no way he can overcome his temptation? He's doomed to fail from the start. And this would lead us to all sorts of theological questions about the good God and the just God. So if you take a look at the second source on your page, what's the subject? What's the parsha called? Say it out loud, please. I can't hear you. The second source on your page. Eishes Yifas Torah. So Rashi gives a whole spiel about Eishes Yifas Torah. Lo dibra Torah ela keneged yetzer hara. You're out at battle, and all that's involved, and the woman is attractive. Im ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu matira, with a mapik yisayin b'yisur. What does it sound like Rashi's telling us?
Can't overcome.
Can't overcome it. The deck is stacked. The cards are stacked against you. And once again, the Torah is acknowledging it. But in this case, as opposed to the first case that we spoke about, the Torah, I think, is so convinced that the challenge is too intense, it's too enormous, that therefore the Torah is matir her. Again, through an entire process. But at the end of the day, the Torah reconciles itself with the, shall we say, the psychological fact that this challenge is too great. Or at least for most people, it's too great. So there's a famous story. I don't know if you heard of the Rosh Yeshiva of Hebron. He's no longer Rabbi Yecheskel Sarn. Great Rosh Yeshiva. The story is told that once he had a plenum session, a question and answer session, with a group of what we call Chilonim. Israelis who are not, or as Rav Kook would have said, not yet religious. And one of the kids raised his hand and he said, look, I'm going to prove to you from your Torah, so they can always quote the Torah, when they have to, that the Torah realizes that there are certain situations in which nature is so powerful, the temptation is so intense, he can't overcome. People talk today about issues of mishkav zok, homosexuality. Impossible. A person's born, and that's the way he is. You can't hold them responsible for it. I don't want to get into this now. Maybe after the shir we can talk about it. It's not. I don't consider myself an expert on that topic, so I'm not going to say anything. But the young person in the audience brought this as a raya. See, Rosh Hashiva, you see, the Torah says we have to be matir. There's no way, no how you can overcome the temptation. So what did the Rosh Hashiva answer? Alam, clever. He says, on the contrary, this parsha proves my point. There's only one situation in all of the Torah where the Torah says it's permissible. All other situations, the Torah assumes whatever challenge you find yourself in, you can overcome the temptation. You can succeed in the challenge. Dafka, from the exception to the rule, you derive the rule. And what is the rule? That the Torah puts you in a situation of challenge because it believes, it knows that you can succeed. And therefore you will be held to task if you don't. B'chirach of shit, freedom of choice, is absolute. The one exception is Eishes Yifastar. We don't find it elsewhere. Don't make this into the Binyan Av, into the universal. This is the exception to the rule. However, I would like to point out that there is one case where I think the halach itself recognizes that a person is not guilty because of a situation that was just too difficult to expect of the person to succeed. Take a look, if you will, at the Gemara in Ksubas. This is the fourth source before the end of the page, on page 1. It's Gemara Daf Nun Aleph. And the Gemara is talking about a situation of alanara lo sasador. It means a rape situation. And Shmuel says that the Eidim testify about this married woman who was raped by another man, Rachmana litzlan, that she was screaming the whole time. And therefore she's allowed to go back to her husband. So the Gemara says, Upliga de Rava. Rava says no. She doesn't have to be screaming from the beginning to the end. Amar Rava, kol shetchilasa ba'ones. If she was raped, v'sofa baratza. Even though at the end she had some pleasure from the action, afilu hi omeres hanichulo. Let him finish the job. Nevertheless, she's allowed to go back to her husband. She's still considered halachically an anusa in the state of onus. My taima, listen to the Gemara's language, a fascinating phrase. Yitzra albasha. The Yetzer Hara took over her. And I submit to you from this Gemara that there may be a situation in which, and this is accepted halachically, the Yetzer takes over a person and the person loses control. What you might call temporary insanity. But once again, my friends, I would say that this is a very exceptional case. Why? Because the situation started with onus. What was happening was imposed upon her against her will. At that point, somewhere in the middle there, the Yetzer Hara could take over. But once again, from the exception to the rule, you see the rule itself. When she was first faced with the situation, it wasn't a choice situation. It was forced upon her. Other situations, where the person makes a decision, no matter how difficult that is, freedom of choice still operates. And here I want to come to another question that I mentioned to you before. People come and complain, they say, sometimes they say, Rabbi, whatever they say to their wives, to husbands, to their wives to their husbands, why do I deserve this? Where's the reward for my great success? I did this and I went to that and I overcame all this. So I want to tell you something. The paradigm of a success story in a nisayon, I believe, and I'll try to prove this to you, is Yosef HaTzadik. And what situation am I referring to? Eishes Potiphar. The pasuk says about Yosef, Vayonas hachutza. He ran outside And what did he leave in her hands? His own beggar. She was holding on to him by his clothing, and he ran outside. See, if you will, a Medrash in Tehillim, it's 3 sources before the end of the page, page 1. Hayom Rav Hayonos. When the Jewish people came to the Red Sea, the sea itself saw and ran away. So the Medrash says, Ma Ra. Ra Arono Shel Yosef Yored Liyam. If you recall the situation when Bnei Yisrael left Mitzrayim at the time of the redemption, they brought with them the remains of Yosef HaTzadik. When the remains of Yosef were brought towards the Yam sees Yosef and runs away, meaning splits. Why? Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yanus Hayam Mipnei Hanos. The etymology here, the word is identical. The Yam is Nos, and by Yosef it says by Yanus. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yanus Hayam Mipnei Hanos Min Avera. The Yam will run away in the presence of Yosef, who ran from the Avera, for the temptation. Shenemar Vayonas Hachutza. Af Hayom Nos Miponov. Shenemar Hayom Ra Vayonas. Now, let's look at the reward, which according to Chazal in this medrash fits fits the mitzvah. In other words, the reward is midah keneged midah. It's all vayonos vayonos. And let's ask ourselves, what's at stake over here? How great is this reward that's paid to the descendants of Yosef HaTzadik? Is it a small reward or a large reward, a great reward? Josh, what do you say? Well, what's at stake? I mean, if the Yam doesn't split, what happens now? The whole nation gets wiped out. But when was this reward paid off? How many years passed from the time that Yosef was Vayonas Achutza until Vayar Vayonas in the case of Yamsuf? Hundreds of years. And here I want to call to your attention another medrash, which is on the bottom of page 1. The medrash wants to know, when we describe God as Hakel HaNe'eman, Ne'eman, he's trustworthy. Rabbanan Amri, you want to understand what Hakel HaNe'eman means? Me emunaso shel basar v'dam ata yodea emunaso shel HaKadosh Baruch. If you see how trustworthy man is, how reliable man is, you'll make a kal v'chomer, how much more so is God. Where do we see the emunah of man, that he's reliable, that he's trustworthy? Ma'asav Rabbi Pinchas ben Yoel, shayadar bi'ir achas badora. He lived down south, probably somewhere near Lawrence, I guess. Ve'holchu anashim lisparnesha. And there was a whole group of people that flew down south in order to make a living. They were carrying with them 2 bundles of barley. And they couldn't carry it. Vivkido etzlo. They left it in the hands of Rav Pinchas ben Yoel as they went through this business trip. V'shachachan, and they forgot about it. Now we turn to page 2. The Medrash continues. V'holchu lehem, they went back to their place. So what did Rav Pinchas ben Yoel do? Zorea, he took the barley, apparently they were barley seeds, and he planted them. Bechol shana, year after year. V'asal son goren, he harvested the barley, year in and year out. V'konson, and he collected it in a silo. Achar sheva shanim, 7 years went by. The man is harvesting barley 7 years and keeping it in a silo. Holchu osan hachaverim l'sham, and all of a sudden that original group of people shows up. Litva osan litam lahem, to give him back the 2 bags of barley. They must have been in deep freeze for 7 years. 7 years later, they came for the 2 bags of barley. Miyad hikar osam Pinchas ben Yair, he recognized. Amar lehem, bo utlu otzosechem. He shows them otarot. Otarot means treasures. Listen, you could imagine how much barley was stored in the silos, how much it was worth on the market after 7 years. Says the Midrash, this is what you call emunah. When a person repays after 7 years with an unbelievable reward. And by the way, I don't think Rav Pinchas ben Yair was obligated to do this. You could see the emunah that, and the faith that we can have in man, at least a man like Rav Pinchas ben Yair, and that should be a mirror image, a small microcosm of what the emunah, the reliability, the trustability of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself is. And I underline the next few words in the Midrash because I think that's the punchline. Sheneman l'shalem liYisrael schar hamitzvah shein oseh. You come along and you tell me, where's the schar? How come I haven't been repaid? Where's the reward for my great actions? And the answer is hakel hanem. It may take generations. Who knows if what we're experiencing today in the salvations that we have are not in the merit of our ancestors from hundreds of years ago. Yosef HaTzadik does an action. He overcomes temptation. It's no coincidence that we call him a tzaddik. And his children's children's children are rewarded with the great redemption, the great salvation of Kriyas Yamsuf. Centuries down the line. But Hashem is a Kel Hanem. So if you come to me and you say to me, Rabbi, I don't understand, things that aren't going so well, where's my reward? I say to you, this is a test as well. A test of your faith. Do you describe Hashem? You say, Kel Melech Nema. Right? You say it twice a day, 3 times a day, Kriyish Palamita. And the question is, do you hear what you're saying? You are declaring that the King of Kings is Neman. He is even greater than Pinchas ben Yair. That I can trust. But you have to have faith. And you have to have belief. So yes, God tests us. And yes, they're difficult tests. And the Torah doesn't poo-poo them. The Torah recognizes the difficulties of the trials that we face. And yes, if we fail, Chas v'shalom, we will be taken to task, despite the fact that it's a difficult climb. But yes, when we succeed, we have to know the reward is coming. It may be put away in an outside. Maybe it's in a silo. Maybe it's producing and reproducing. And look how great the reward is. Yosef HaTzadik is one man in one episode of his life. And according to this Midrash, the salvation of the entire people of Israel is quid pro quo, is a success, a reward for that one trial and tribulation. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, Zichron DOV, the great Rosh Yeshiva from Mir in Yerushalayim, and also in Mir back in Shanghai, has a very interesting insight into the whole concept of Nisayon. You'll see it on the bottom of page 1. He says, Ikar avodaso shel adam hu livroach mimokom hasakon. He says the main function or responsibility that's imposed upon us is to run away from challenges. Lisrachik min anisayon kechol she'efshar. V'lo, and not as some people mistakenly believe, sheyamod b'makom nisayon. He should deliberately expose himself to challenges. People say, oh, I'm a big shot. Even Shlomo Melech said it. I'm going to face the Yetzer Hara. I'm going to take him on. Don't do it. Says Reb Chaim, it's not acceptable. And Reb Chaim goes on with another insight. And by the way, that's why we say every day in davening, Al Tivienu Lidei Nisayon. We ask Hashem to spare us of these nisyonos. We don't look for them. We don't seek them out. And Reb Chaim has another point which I have here for you on page 2. Smack in the middle of the page. K'shakadosh Baruch Hu nosei nisayon la'adam, but when God Almighty decides, yes, it's time for you to be tested, says Reb Chaim, the sweet words, it's like a song to my ears. Yachad im hanisayon, nosei lo koach la'amal. Together with the challenge, God gives you powers that you yourself didn't know you had. Just by a show of hands, I'm curious. How many of you have ever read a book, fantastic book, I mean very depressing, but an unbelievable piece of literature, by Yafa Eliach, Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust? David, you read it? Anyone else? You must read it. I remember reading it before Yom Kippur when it first came out. I couldn't put it down. For about 3 days, that's all that existed was this book, Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust, by Yafel. She won a prize for it also. And that Yom Kippur was probably the most powerful Yom Kippur I ever had. Just reviewing in my mind some of the stories she tells. A whole bunch of the stories are about the Bluzhever Rebbe Olvashon, who died an old man. He was a great man. He survived the Holocaust. And she was interviewing him, and he told a number of stories. One story he tells is just mind-boggling, but I think it's relevant to us tonight. The Nazis in Machshamam lined up the Jews on one side of a gigantic ditch, and they made the proclamation: anyone who could jump over the ditch and land safely on the other side will be spared. Everyone else, this was the games they played, will die, will be killed. It was impossible, so to speak, to jump over that ditch. It was just a game of the Yamachshir. The Bluzhever Rebbe describes himself standing at the edge of the ditch, praying to the Ribono Shel Olam, and telling him that not in my schus will you save me, but in the schus of my father and my grandfather. And he goes through all the generations, and he closes his eyes and he jumps. And he opens his eyes and finds himself on the other side of the ditch. Now you can interpret this story in many different ways. You could say it was a ness, it was a miracle, it was supernatural, and it probably was. But the flip side of it, and I don't think it's a contradiction, is that man has powers within him that he himself is unaware of. That if you look at it on the superficial level, it's impossible. Ken it sein, as we say in Yiddish. But in a challenge, man comes up with new energies. I think this is what Reb Chaim Shmulevitz has in mind when he says that Yachad im hanisayon nosein lo koach la'amal. Let's go back to the case of Yosef HaTzadik. All the Mefarshim ask, why is it that Yosef left his beged in the hands of Eshes Potiphar? What? Couldn't he have wrestled them out of the hands? This is a very humiliating experience. The answer is, according to Reb Chaim, you cannot remain in a situation of nisayon even for a split second. Don't even think about it. Flee. Run away. It would have taken him a fraction of a second maybe to wrestle his clothing out of her hands. But he wouldn't even jeopardize himself for that extra fraction of a second because it's a makam nisayon. The Gemara tells us in the Sechus.
Wouldn't you argue that sorry to interrupt, that maybe he was in that state of mind because he had previously put himself in that makam?
Could be.
Alone with her.
But the bottom line is, I'm not talking about his responsibility, I'm talking about his triumph. And the Torah goes out of its way to tell us that triumph required vayonos.
So I was saying, initially he didn't avoid the situation.
Good.
Right.
Again, I want to focus, David, on his success. Let's leave out all the moments that contributed.
Okay.
How, at the end of the day, was he able to succeed? The Torah goes out of its way to tell us vayonos. Vayonos to such an extent that he left his beged to him. Again, I'm claiming it would have taken him a split second to wrestle the beged out, but no, it's vayonos. And for that vayonos, A, we have the success of Yosef, and B, the reward that comes generations later of Vayonas, Vayar, Hayom Vayonas. And we asked the question at the beginning, at the outset, are there any hinters, any pointers that we can get from the Torah, from Chazal, as to how to succeed in the case of situation, of temptation? How do you overcome? And I think this is a fundamental principle. You gotta run away. Don't expose yourself. Don't linger around and start asking questions. This is not a time to be mafalpel. This is a time to get the heck out of there as fast as you can. And I think it's a Gemara in Sota. Take a look at the Gemara in Sota, which you'll see on page 2. It's, I think, the third source on your page. Reish Lakish Omar. Ein Adam over Avera Elim Kain Nichnas Bo Ruach Shtus. What is this Ruach Shtus? So again, let's go back to the Moshe. You're standing facing an Isai. Where are you? Are you running away or are you moving forward? Are you getting close? Says Reish Lakish, don't get too close. Because you know what's going to happen when you get close? You know, things that allure you, they stimulate your curiosity. Now, let's take a look and see what's going on over there. And people are curious about all sorts of things. I remember a story, this is an interesting story, about studying Greek mythology. There was a professor at the Jewish Theological Seminary. He also was a professor of classics at Columbia University. You probably have heard of him. If not, you should have heard of him. His name was Professor Saul Lieberman. He was one of the greatest minds of generations. I mean, it was an unusual genius. So Rav Parnas, Rav Yehuda Parnas Shlita, who's a former Rosh Yeshiva at YU, now he's at Landers College, once asked Professor Lieberman the following question. My students would like to study Greek mythology. It's literature. You know, you read about Zeus and the gods and the battles and the wars and the love stories and the romance. It's fun. You know, we I don't know here in Canada, but in America you used to have Marvel comics. You know, or the classics used to have Greek mythology. So Professor Lieberman, so reports Rav Parnas, got very serious. His face turned very stern. He said, I would not recommend studying Greek mythology. For me, it's a parnasa. That's my PhD. But I wouldn't recommend it. He said, it's moshech. It has an allurement to it. Who would believe that Greek mythology is anything but children's comic books? You know? But he said, if you really get into it, it's literature on a deeper level, and it really could have a power. It's like my Rebbe once told us that his father, Moshe Soloveitchik, was opposed to the study of Bible criticism. Some people say, we'll study the Bible critics and we'll come up with all sorts of answers. Rav Moshe said no. Once you start studying Bible criticism, it puts your mind into an environment. It's like walking into a very dangerous place where there are germs. You know, you would not expose yourself to a contagious disease unless you absolutely had to, for the sake of refuah, whatever it might be. Stay away. Is Ein Adam Chote says, Rav Shlakish, you know when the Yetzer Hara gets the best of you? When it's a Ruach Shtus. The Ruach Shtus just pushes you over the edge. You get so close to the bar, and you're looking in because you're curious. We all have a natural state of curiosity. You know, what does it look like? What does she look like? What is it? Come close, come close. And before you know it, you're in the bottom of the pit. Because the Ruach Shtus pushes you across. And we ask the question, does a Nisayon sometimes require of you to go against your own essence, your own nature? The Ramban says that the source in the Torah, the first word of Nisayon in the Torah is which Nisayon? The Akedah. And the Ramban goes into great length talking about this Nisayon of Avraham Avinu at the Akedah. You'll see it towards the bottom of page 2.
He calls it the first Nisayon?
I think so, if I'm not mistaken. Is there a Nisayon before that I skipped? I mean the word Nisayon in the Tanakh.
Okay,
you know, we always look at the word as it at first appears in Tanakh. That's what I meant to say.
Sorry.
No, I'm glad you asked because I wasn't clear. What is the Nisayon of Avram? If not a situation in which man is called upon, Avram is called upon to do something that's antithetical to his very nature. As binchas yechidcha she'ahavta es Yitzchak. But the Ramban answered a very interesting clause. He says, Hashem already knew from the start that Avram had the ability to succeed in this mission. The nisayon is for the tova, for the benefit of the menusa, of the person who's being tested. It's to bring menakoach al ha'poal, to bring out the potential to the actual, because the schar, the reward a person gets is for his actions more than for his thoughts. So you may have the capability of doing something great, overcoming some unbelievable challenge. Hashem will only test you because He wants your benefit. You're a tzaddik and He knows that you can succeed, even if it means something unbelievably difficult. And as a result, that which is in potential comes out into the world of mass, of action, and you'll be duly rewarded. And many people will tell you, sensitive individuals, intelligent individuals, that the test that they go through changes them, it transforms them, it elevates them, it makes them more sensitive individuals. My wife has a friend who has a deaf child, and as a result of the child being deaf, the mother is so connected to that child. I mean, the love, the special relationship between mother and child in this case is unbelievable. Many people will tell you they went through difficult physical situations, challenges, breast cancer, whatever it is, and as a result, they opened up organizations and chesed, they care for others, they're sensitive. The Gemara tells us about Rabbi Yochanan, that he lost 10 sons, Rabbi Yochanan. And he had the bone, some say it's a tooth of his 10th child that he buried. And he would walk around with it to be Menachem Avelim, so that people would see that he could relate to their sorrow. So we have to understand that a nisayon can elevate a person, make him more sensitive, purify him. It's an experience of catharsis, and it's an unbelievable challenge. Who can imagine the situation, and it's happened many times in Jewish history, of a great leader of Klal Yisrael who finds out about a tragic loss in his family on Yontif. Does anybody know what happens halachically in the case of Avelus on Yontif?
Can't move.
Completely suspended. And the Torah comes along and says, how's it possible? So I can't imagine such a test. That's the honest truth. In my case, I would say, let's go back to Gemara Ksubas about Yitzra Alvasha and say this is Chilas of Onis. But there were individuals, greats, that would spend the entire Yontif experiencing the joy of Yontif on that level as if nothing happened. They recited Havdalah and fell apart. Started on Yontif. Unbelievable the powers that a person has. The Michtav Meliyo, Rav Elio Dessler, is very famous. I couldn't type it in here; it would take me ages. For what he calls the Nekudas Habachira. He says that there's a shifting scale as you go through life. The greater you are, the less you are tempted by the lower base temptations, so that it's all relative. And when you get to a higher level, those temptations that apply to younger people or to less great people are no longer on your radar screen. You're not tempted by the lower base temptations, but there are other temptations. The Gemara says about a Kohen Gadol, at the age of 80 he became an Apikos. Until you're finished with this world, you will be tested. Now, tests are relative. It all depends on your situation. Obviously, a person who's handicapped physically, Rahman al can't be expected to succeed in certain tests because of his physical handicap. He'll have other tests. He'll have nisyonos that are relevant to him, and within his situation he can succeed in them. Once again, I want to ask about a book. Has anyone by any chance heard of a book called Let Us Make Man? Doesn't ring a bell? It's written by Professor Rabbi Twersky, Abraham Twersky from Pittsburgh, a great psychiatrist and a great Talmud Chacham. And I recommend the book, but there's one particular essay or a few pages in the book that you have to read. It's like required reading. He speaks about his fear in visiting a particular client of his, a woman who is totally, Rahman incapacitated. She can't do anything on her own. She's actually covered her whole body in a kind of machine. The only thing that's out of the machine, as she lays on her back, is her face. And Professor Tversky, as her physician, as her psychiatrist, is called upon to meet this woman, encourage her, and somehow take her out of the state of depression. And he describes for paragraph after paragraph how he doesn't begin to know how he's going to do anything. And then he explains that every individual has that challenge. We know from the Nefesh HaChaim of Reb Chaim Volozhin, if you've ever heard of that sefer, that the entire cosmos and everything that goes on in our upper spheres is impacted, is influenced by what we do here on this low world, the Olam HaShofar. When we make decisions, when we implement actions, those actions have a ripple effect on things that go on in the higher spheres, in the higher worlds. And it matters not whether you can do something bombastic and drastic and the whole world knows about you, you're a hero in the Colosseum facing the gladiators, or if it happens within the confines of your own private life. Even at sometimes in the mind. Her challenge and the beauty of what she could bring as a contribution, says Rav Tversky, is that in her mind, if she could accept her situation, what we call Kabbalas Hadin, and accept the fact that this is how she has to face reality, but try to face it with as much simcha as she can, appreciating Almighty God because she's still alive. The greatest treasure and gift that we can have is life itself. And Rav Tversky goes on from page after page describing what he tried to do and how he tried to cheer her up. I'm not even dreaming about how I or any of us would face this challenge. But the fundamental concept, at least on a conceptual level, is that we all have our own world, which is relative to our station in life, with our physical limitations, our age limitations, our family limitations, and what we can be challenged and how we can contribute to the olamos, to the overall cosmological picture. And here I want to call to your attention the Gemara in Sanhedrin, which I think supports Rav Chaim Shmulevitz's contention that a person should not expose himself deliberately to nisyonos. We don't look for them, we don't seek them out. The Gemara is the second source on page 2. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, Sanhedrin Daf Kuf Zayin, Li'olam al yavi adam atzmo lidei nisayon. This is as explicit, as outspoken as you can get. Shrei David Melech Yisrael hevi atzmo lidei nisayon v'nichshal. Who is greater than David HaMelech? He's one of the legs of the pillars of the Merkava itself. It's no coincidence that David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayim, all our aspirations. And yet, he exposed himself to an Nisayon, and he failed. There is, however, on page 3, a Gemara on Avodah Zarah, which seems to reveal for us a secret, a sort of superhuman power that man can gain for himself, an energy force that he can link into, that he can plug into, and succeed in Nisayon. The Gemara tells us the following story. Rav Chanina v'Rav Yonasan havika azli be'urcha matu lahanach treishvi. Two great Amoraim were going on their way, and they came to a fork in the road. Chad Potzi, one opened up, at the end of that road, if you go to the right, a pischa d'avodas kolchavim, to some sort of temple for idol worship. V'chad Potzi a pischa d'beizonos. And the other road led, if you would take it there, you'd have to pass through some sort of place of harlotry. So you've got two temptations here, Avodah Zarah and Gilui Arayos. So they discuss this. Which way should we go? Perhaps one said to the other, we don't know which said to whom, let's go down the way of Avodas Kolchavim. Did Nachis Yitzrei. The Yetzer Hara is not as great. And Rashi explains because the Anshe Knesset Hagdola prayed, if you remember the Gemara, I think it's in Avodah Zarah, in that same sugya, to reduce the powerful allurement of Avodah Zarah, which we today don't even know what it's all about. I think that we can expose ourselves to the sexual immorality, to that temptation. And we'll succeed in overcoming our Yetzer. And we'll get rewarded for that. So this is a kind of achlokas. Kimatu Hasam, for some reason they decided to accept the second view, and they walked down the sexual temptation. Chazinu Lizonos. All of a sudden they see these girls. Iskanu Mikamayu. And the girls ran away from them. How were you able to succeed in such a case? He said to him, because I have in my pocket a pasuk in Mishnah. But not just a pasuk, but a unique understanding and interpretation of that pasuk. Shlomo Melech says, Mizima, that's the key word here, Mizima, Tishmar Alecha Tvuna Tinsar. Olei Rabbana L'Rava. My Mizima. What does the word Mizima mean? Ilema Torah, because Torah elsewhere in Tanakh, in Yeshaya Novi, is described as a Zima, which means it has the ability to sharpen you and make you a clever person, and then you'll be able to overcome the Atzas HaChotim. If that be the case, it says Mizima. Why does it say Mizima with a mem? It should have said Zima without a mem. Hachi Kamar. Mi Dvar Zima. The mem is telling us that Torah has the power to protect you from a Dvar Zima, meaning from some sort of immoral act. Tishmar Alecha Torah. Torah itself, Tinatzurcha, will, milashon natsur, means protected, will save. Says Rashi, Tishmar Alecha Torah. How do we know that the Torah is protecting you mizima? The Sefer the Tvuna, the last part of the pasuk mentions the word Tvuna. Tvuna means wisdom. Wisdom refers to the Torah. And it says Tishmar Alecha. And what does Tishmar Alecha mean? It will protect you Mikol Dovara V'Hiruchet, from any sort of temptation. And what was Rav Yonasan saying to Rav Chanino, or vice versa? V'anu, and we Holchim Haloch V'Daber B'Divrei Torah. We are speaking to each other, conversing, and sharing Divrei Torah. I think what's going on here in this Gemara is that the Gemara is revealing an unbelievable energy force, a powerful protective force that can help us and save us from a very intense exposure to the clutches of the Yetzer Hara, and that is L'daber B'Divrei Torah. But we have to understand that L'daber B'Divrei Torah, in the case of two Chavrusas, means not just that they were reading psukim in Tanakh, just superficially, but they were really discussing some issue. Their minds were preoccupied, were obsessed with an in-depth analysis of those sugyas. In such a case, nothing can enter into them in temptation. They won't be derailed. And the pasuk in Mishlei guarantees them, under that situation, a tremendous success. So let's add a second, shall I say, how-to, a recommendation on how to protect ourselves from the Yetzer Hara. The first one we said was Vayonas, and the second one, only in very unique circumstances, on a high level of Daber Holchim V'Daber B'Divrei Torah. And finally, I think there's a third Eitzim Chazal. And this is the case of Palti ben Laish. Does anybody know who that guy was? He's not one of the most famous people in Tanakh, but he should be. If you recall, there's a story about Shaul HaMelech. he had a daughter by the name of Michal Bas Shaul. And David HaMelech was an Orus, Miloshen Erisin, was engaged, but I don't mean engaged as we call it engaged, but he was married to Michal Bas Shaul. Shaul did not recognize that marriage. He perceived in his mind David HaMelech to be his arch enemy, and he came to the conclusion that the Erisin between David and Michal was not valid. David himself knew it was valid, and most of the people knew it was valid too. Shaul HaMelech married off Michal to an individual by the name of Palti. And the Gemara says that the word Palti means Palat min achet. Now imagine the situation. Palti is living as husband and wife with a woman who's married to another man. But he's a great tzaddik. He's dedicated to overcome the Yetzer Hara on a daily basis and not have any contact with this woman, even though she's the daughter of Shaul and was married off to him. Not really, but he knew that she was married to David. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin asks the following question: Polto min achet. HaKadosh Baruch Hu saved him from sin, but what did he do to deserve it? And the Gemara tells us the following story. When Palti was in this situation, when he found himself again married in quotation marks to Michal Bas Shaul, he took a sword, v'na'at b'karka, and he pierced it into the ground. V'omer, he declared, Kol mi sheyavar cherev zeh yidaker b'cherev. If anyone crosses this line, they will be killed by this cherev. And that's what protected Palti for all that period of time from going as far as coming near to Michal Bas Shaul, who was married off to David. The question is obvious. Rav Chaim Shmulevitz raises the question. I don't get it. Who put the sword into the ground? It was Palti himself. The same Palti who put the sword into the ground could easily remove the sword. If the Yetzer Hara gets the best of him, he'll just remove it. Who most of all, who a firing club. The answer is that Palti understood a deep psychological principle. When we face temptation, and we feel initially a sense of kedusha, of sanctity, we're elevated. We really are dedicated to the task. We will not let the Yetzer Hara get the best of us. But there's no possibility of Vayonas Achutza. There's no possibility of Hayaholech V'daber B'divrei Torah. Then do a symbolic act. Something that will remind you constantly, whenever you see this thing, of the feelings that you had, the dedication and the sincerity you had when you made that sign for yourself. I remember there was a student I taught in Michala. I don't know if you've heard of Michala in Israel. And at the end of the year, she was so elevated and so uplifted by Eretz Yisrael. She wanted to guarantee for herself that even though she had to go back to Chutz La'aretz, that she would always remain dedicated and committed to come back to Eretz Yisrael. So what did she do?
Something behind.
She decided not to change her clock, to leave her watch on Israeli time. Now there's a 7-hour difference. A week ago it was a 6-hour difference. Has a tremendous effect on me, that extra hour, because I used to Skype my family when I came for the break, Bein Astorim, when after 5 o'clock it was only 11 p.m. My whole family was awake. Now it's already after midnight by the time I get home from Second State. It's a little bit of a problem. My girls are still staying up to Skype with me. So what did this girl do? She looks at her watch, and it's got Israeli time. And she constantly makes the calculation to figure out what the time is locally. 5 years later, she came on Aliyah as a married woman to settle in Eretz Yisrael. She did not have to change her clock. Everyone has to be creative. Everyone has to think in their own way how they can come up with a sign that will constantly remind them of their, what should I say, his alutz, of their of their aliyah ruchanit, of their spiritual dedication at those moments of elevation. To be dedicated and never let those feelings wane away and just fall into the background. And last but not least, to keep in touch with our parents, our rebbeim, our mashpiyim, those who can guide us in the right way. The Gemara says, David, you hinted to it, that at some point Yosef was coming home to do the action, according to one opinion. Lasos malachta. But Rod Musti Yukno Shalom. Imagine, for decades, he hasn't seen his father. Almost 2 decades. He hasn't seen his father. His father, Yaakov, was also his Rebbe. And the dmus of his father appeared to him. I think Freud would have a blast with this Gemara. But it really is true. We have a certain superego, a certain commitment that comes to us because of the inspiration to live up to the expectations of those who came before us, especially our teachers, those who gave us so much. So if we put the picture together, just to summarize, Al tivienu lidei nisayon, don't look for nisyonos. If you find yourself in a nisayon, understand that God gave you the powers to overcome. As difficult as they seem, you will find supernatural abilities within yourself. But the practical suggestions are A, fayonos, run away as fast as you can, pick yourself up and go. Number 2, it should always be with divrei Torah, have a connection to Torah. Number 3, you should always have a vision of who you are and how the temptation of sin could chas v'shalom lower you. And number 4, like Palti ben Laish, make yourself signs. Something that's subjective. It's got to be your own originality. No one could dictate it for you. And those signs will always remind you of that state of higher dedication to Torah values. And at the end of the day, we should all succeed in our nisyonos and appreciate that God is doing it for our behalf. So we'll be rewarded for our actions. And that reward we may not see immediately. But Almighty God is the Kel Nema. We can rely upon Him for the sake of our children, our children's children. It may take decades and generations until that reward is divvied out. But the day of the reward will come, and that reward will be so much greater and more immense. And we should all be zocher to see the great day of all the rewards, the reward of all rewards, and that is Bias Goel Tzitenu B'Meher V'Yameinu. Amen.